Hello, Americans. I'm Kenton McNall. It's Constitution time. Today is February 4th, 2021. In reducing my live stream Constitution time down to once a week, obviously a lot more things happen between shows. The topic of our show this evening is Impeachment II. But just a couple of things before that. As the third week of President Biden's tenure has rolled by, we've seen a lot of things, but it's clear that we already see the return of ultimate partisanship with very few exceptions. Opposition leadership, to borrow a British term, just simply isn't participating in anything that the new president wants to do. And I sincerely hope that that can change, because I think there's sincere desire to work in a bipartisan fashion, and that would be best for the country. But best for the country doesn't seem to enter into the equation very often anymore. It really, truly seems to be mostly and sometimes only about what will get me reelected. And if I could say one thing to all of our leaders, all of the politicians who lead us, it would be that this country will be just fine if you do not get reelected. But it will not be just fine if we continue to fail to work together. And I sincerely hope that people find it in their conscience to work together soon. I have one thought I wanted to share on Ms. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who may be one of the first of the new Trumps, the people emboldened by the behavior of the former president to act like the former president, the brashness, the arrogance, the willingness to be out there with truly awful sentiments and opinions, conspiracy theories, and willingness to share the same. The thought has been expressed by many, including people close to me, that it's not fair to remove that person from committee assignments or indeed from the House itself because of their views. It's not fair to the people who sent them to office. The argument is made that those people may have known exactly who they were sending to Congress, and that's the way they want to be represented. I don't personally believe that, but it may be true. But I will simply say that if you choose to send a KKK Grand Wizard or someone who is a known criminal or known to commit crimes or is a racist, then that's what you're going to get. And this cancel culture talk that is going around because Josh Hawley's book deal got canceled by the publisher. Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens when you do very, very unpopular and very cynical things. People do not want to be represented by you. That's the way it works. That's the way it's always worked. Stars in Hollywood watch their P's and Q's, because if they're dependent on advertisers for their show, Charlie Sheen, they're going to lose them, every single one, if they behave poorly. And that's all that it boils down to. I feel bad for the folks that sent Marjorie Taylor Greene to office that didn't know that she had done these things, but it all points out that we really do need to put more effort into knowing our candidates, knowing who we're sending to Washington. On to our topic, which I think is much more important: impeachment. For the second time in one presidency, we're again going through the impeachment process. I expressed at the time of the first impeachment process that I felt it was not well done by the Democrats. I felt they rushed it and could have done a much better job. And if they'd waited a little bit longer, there was much more compelling information that came out. But this is the second time around. It's a very different set of circumstances. But I don't want to talk about the specifics of those circumstances. I want to talk about impeachment and especially the objection, the major defense that's going to be put up for the president, for the former president, which is that it is unconstitutional to impeach a former president. You know, I give our founders a lot of credit. And one of the things that they were the most concerned about was the possibility of someone, a poor character, being voted into office, or perhaps someone who wasn't a poor character, but who could have been corrupted by the power of the office, being in such a position of power with no way to prosecute them. And so they adopted impeachment, which goes back to the Roman Empire, the British Empire. It was not a new idea, but it was the way that our founders said, if the executive, who we have imbued with all of this power and responsibility, is wayward, corrupt, attempts to become a king to keep himself in office, then impeachment is what you can do, how you can remove that person, and furthermore, ensure that they do not hold office again. Now, the current case is a perfect example, as was the Nixon case, of why impeachment is necessary. But there's a really key difference in the Nixon case. In the Nixon case, the president had not been impeached. He was going to be impeached, without question. He was going to be impeached. But he had not been impeached, and he resigned. And he resigned to avoid impeachment and the prosecution of impeachment. But he was already in his second term, and he could not be the president again. So in reality, the entire process of impeachment for Nixon would simply have shortened his presidency somewhat, but may not have had any other impact on him because he could not be the president again. Now, they could have still, gone that extra step and said, you don't get to hold another office. Could have done that. But the reality was that it was not that impactful. His resignation and avoidance of impeachment, which is all that a president has to do according to these folks who say you can't impeach someone once they're out of office. So once they're caught with hands in the cookie jar, no matter how high or low the crime is, all they have to do is resign and they don't get impeached or prosecuted at all. Well, we've got to give our founders more credit than that. They clearly did not intend for the final months of a president's term to be this free-for-all of whatever they want to do because they cannot be prosecuted unless they break state laws. They did not intend that. They intended for impeachment to go from the beginning day of the presidency to the end day of the presidency, period. There is no way that we can let that stand, that the president, because for one thing, in the last couple of months in a president's term, that's exactly when the election is taking place. So what, they can do like this president did and do whatever they want to call into question the election or to themselves manipulate the election, and nothing's going to happen to them because there's not time to do a full impeachment? And that's exactly the situation here, because the Senate would not cooperate, because it was the same party as the president, and we have ultimate partisanship. Even 2 months was not enough to do an impeachment. So therefore, there wouldn't be an impeachment. That is not, absolutely not what our founders intended. They're very intelligent men. They would know that the most likely time that a president is going to commit such crimes, including the pardons, and the many crimes that can be committed with the pardons, is at the end of their term, especially at the end of their second term. And that's exactly the case here. And that's exactly why not only is this constitutional, it would be unconstitutional to not run the impeachment, whether he's in office or not. Now, the defense will trot out Alan Dershowitz or other pundits who will say, of course, the founding fathers did not intend this. And we already have, in the second part of my conversation, many who are saying this is not constitutional, but they never address what is supposed to happen to a clearly law-breaking president in the final weeks of his term. They never say, here's what should happen to them. No, here's the process that will follow. They literally, in saying it's unconstitutional, are simply saying the president can do whatever he wants in the final weeks of his term because there's not enough time to impeach and convict. Americans, we got to use our common sense, and we need to strongly encourage our legislators to use their common sense and demand to know, well, then what is the punishment? What happens to a president who commits egregious crimes in the final weeks of their presidency? Because the specifics of this case is, short of the president nuking ourselves or an ally, or outright murdering his political opponent in the election, what this president did is as bad as it gets. Incitement to riot and insurrection that led directly to death and dire peril for Congress, Senate, Vice President. That's as bad as it gets, folks. So what is the remedy for that? If it's not impeachment? I think that it's very important that we not let this go by, because it will simply lead to the next president who wants to be a king taking it all to the next level and to the next step. And that is how a democracy dies and a dictatorship is born. We have to take a stand on this. And we cannot let this person back in office. We can't let the partisan games, and that's part two of the conversation here. We all know as Americans how our jury system works. You are not going to get seated on a jury if you tell the judge, oh yeah, I've already made up my mind on this case. Grade school children know that in this country. Yet, we have senators on both sides of the aisle who have openly stated they've already made up their minds. They don't care what the evidence is. They don't care what is presented. Ultimate partisanship is going to rob us of our opportunity to set a precedent here, which is that we will not tolerate this type of lawbreaking at any point in a president's term, but especially not in the final weeks and around the election, and in an attempt to override the election to stay in office. We will not tolerate that. And that opportunity is being taken by people who are not being good jurors, are not doing what they swear to do when they swear in as an impeachment trial juror. They have already said they've made up their mind. That alone could disqualify them if the folks who are so concerned about the rules of the Senate wanted to pay a little attention to that. Would that not disqualify the senators if they broke their oath and, before they even took it? But this is on both sides. And as I've said before on the show, impeachment will come up again and again and again, because that line has been crossed in such a way that just as The first impeachment of Donald Trump may have been foreordained because the Democrats wanted to get back for what happened to Bill Clinton. That may happen to every president now. And not for good reason, just because they can, if they're in the majority. But we cannot allow people who are not keeping their oath to take the opportunity away to make sure that anyone thinking of doing what the past president did has a clear understanding of what will happen to them if they do. That they will be impeached, they will be tried, they will be convicted, they will lose their current presidency and any opportunity to be president in the future. This is one I'm pretty hot about, to be honest with you, because there doesn't seem to be any of the processes of our government, even some that have been very solemnly adhered to in the past, that are not being run over by this partisanship of people that are not thinking of their country, not even thinking of their constituents, the people who sent them into office. They're only thinking about what will please the base so that I can get reelected again. That's the only thing that's important to them, is getting reelected again. And I very much tip my hat to people like Liz Cheney, who I have never ever felt that way about before. The so few who vote their conscience and say, this is not who we are, this is not who we want to be, and my constituents may well send me home. But if they do, it will be because I have a conscience and I use the conscience. Stay tuned on that one. The impeachment trial starts next week. I personally believe that, probably like the last one, that we'll spend many, many days presenting evidence and things that could be presented in much less time. But this is important, and I think it's worth paying attention to. Thank you for joining me, Americans. We'll see you next week on Constitution Time.